Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to the March OCBA Forum. Glad to have so many of you here. I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm ready for spring to arrive. It has been cold outside these last few days, and the good news is, from what I understand, listening to the weather people, we might see some sunshine this weekend, so it can't get here soon enough. But today we have a very special presentation. We've got Gary Barth, his consultant team has been selected to go ahead and be the construction supervising group that's going to oversee coming out of the ground of a $150 million new courthouse facility up in the Red Soils campus next to the two administrative buildings that are already in existence up there on top of the hill. And right now, they've already received $1.2 million from the state for the planning and design of the facilities. The reason why this courthouse has an opportunity to really go forward is it's taking place in a window that the state is offering right now. Well, they'll go ahead and match up to 50% of the cost of that facility. In this particular case, I believe the number that was quoted was $154 million, so approximately. Okay, well, I'm not going to steal any of Gary's message, but anyway, I think it's going to be a very informational, insightful presentation. But I do want to just mention two other things that kind of ties in with the existing courthouse that we have in downtown on Main Street. If you were up late last night watching the 12 o'clock news or got up this morning and watched the news on Channel 8, you know what I'm going to talk about. As you may be aware, downtown Oregon City had been in the competition and had been selected to the top 10 for one of the best revitalizations of a downtown center throughout the entire nation. The competition was taking place this last weekend in Kansas City, and the announcement was made, as I understand, yesterday. And should I let you know what the outcome was? Or should I wait for you to watch the news? But Oregon City came out number one. So we're really excited about that because with the courthouse now becoming vacant over the next few years, we really see this as an opportunity to continue the revitalization efforts that have been taking place downtown with all the new foodie restaurants, all the new shops and boutiques. And with the courthouse being such an iconic building with so much history associated with it, the opportunities are limitless. So I just hope there's a real creative competition to find what could be the best, most functional, entertaining, informational uses of that old building. The second thing I want to announce, it also has to do with downtown. If you've been reading the newspapers and watching the media, there's been some issues with the Blue Heron site kind of sitting idle. I have good news on that front as well. The owner of the property, the old Blue Heron site, has signed all the permit documents, so the Riverwalk is back on track. There you go. So a lot of things to be excited about in Oregon City right now. A tremendous new facility that Gary's going to talk about, but truly some real jewels and gems in downtown that are going to be going forward. So let me just introduce Gary here. I'll give you a little background about him. He was prior to forming his own consulting company. He was director of business and community development with Clackamas County. I think you said for 12 years you were with the county. He also had experience in the financial background, but being in charge of community business development, he oversaw divisions that dealt with all the park systems for the county, dealt with the timberland for the county, oversaw the operation of the Stone Creek Golf Course. You had your hand in all kinds of pies and pots and things, it seems like. But I've known Gary for a number of years. He's a go-getter. He knows how to accomplish things on time, on budget, and he's really been a tremendous resource for the county over those years. So with that being said, tell us about the new courthouse.
Thank you, Well, while we're waiting, I know many of you in this room, I've got Commissioner Fisher here from the Board of County Commissioners. Are you the only commissioner, joining us today? Welcome. My boss. Still my boss. And the new Director of Business Community Services, Laura Zentner, and her team from Business Economic Development from the county here, folks I've had the pleasure of working with for many years in my former role. I stepped down at the end of December after 11 years working for the county as Director of Business Community Services, a wonderful job. And I'm really an extension of the County Administrator's Office. In this capacity, I report to Laurel Buttman, the Deputy County Administrator who works for Don Krupp, the County Administrator, my former boss. So I've been kind of contracted not to really be the construction manager on the ground. We'll be getting into a lot of requests for proposals and bids and contracts for all the professional firms. My role is really to represent the County Administrator's Office. This is a high priority for the County Administrator and the board. So I am a resource. They've got an awful lot on their plate, so I'm a resource that can just kind of dedicate my focus to this project and a couple of other kind of related projects to help keep this program on track. So, the history of the courthouse. But this is kind of interesting. I'm showing the current courthouse, but really there's the history. The first courthouse was built in 1850, and it had a limited duration. There you go. Thank you. It had a limited duration because it only lasted 7 years before it was destroyed by fire. And there's some great information if you haven't had the opportunity, if you ever get to tour the courthouse or interact with any of the courthouse staff, or we could even possibly see if we can get some copies of this for a future presentation. There's a little pamphlet called Lady Justice in Clackamas County, and it's kind of the history of the courthouse and the courthouse facility, and it's been helpful for me to get a little bit of an understanding. But 1850, the first courthouse destroyed by fire, 1857 to 84 for those next 27 years, and then it just floated around among different rented space to accommodate. It wasn't until 1884 that the second courthouse was built, and it lasted 51 years, but then ultimately it was deemed a fire trap, quote unquote, and was demolished for safety issues. So that led us to the building we have today, which I just realized the ribbon cutting was March 20th. So it just had its 81st birthday last week. And we should have got cake or something, but it was originally built, dedicated March 20, 1937. It only housed one courtroom and all the county functions, departments and electeds, except for the road department. And then a study in 1960, which was just a couple of years ago, deemed that it was due to be replaced. It was no longer adequate with just the one courtroom structure with the growth of the county experiencing. Of course, it hasn't been replaced, so what's happened is all those other county functions continue to vacate the facility, and even some court functions have vacated the facility. For example, if you've served on the jury recently, you actually go to the Holman building, which is down the street, and then you have to, if you get called up, you queue up and you go outside and you stand outside in the elements to get through security to get back into the courthouse. All that is just to free up space to try to squeeze in more courtrooms so the judges can adjudicate and process cases. So we actually, based on metrics, we should have 14 courtrooms today. And we would have funding for those judges and for that operation if we had the space, but we can't possibly get any more courtrooms in there. And this is a lot of the issues that we're kind of dealing with. And we gave you a fact sheet on there too that really highlights the critical issues. And you got, I'll just mention too, a bit of a schematic of what the future new courthouse might look like, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But we obviously have ADA compliance issues with the space shortfalls, inadequate cable running everywhere that's not enclosed in the wall, so it's running on floors and have to be covered, tripping hazards, inaccessible witness stands, that stair device is non-functioning, leading up that small flight of stairs. This works like my remote at home. I click it and then I wait, and then circulation and safety challenges. This is a real critical issue. I just took a tour myself a few weeks ago, but you have an awful lot of commingling of the justice system, the judges and the court workers, as well as the defendants and their attorneys, as well as jurors, as well as friends and family, all kind of commingle and bump into each other at various areas throughout the courthouse, which for our sheriff and our public safety folks is a immense challenge to kind of manage all that interaction. And the seismic that we all know. I mean, this is clearly was not built to withstand a major seismic event. And this is something we're going to have to talk seriously about when it comes time to repurposing this courthouse for future uses. When we vacate, the seismic issues don't change. We eliminated a lot of the other issues that we can do with space planning, but there's still going to have to be some significant seismic work done here. So you can see the fault line that runs there across 99 and kind of runs right into the corner there of the building. And that surface and soil would basically liquefy in the event of a major earthquake with Cascadia. And 99E and most likely the courthouse both may tumble that direction into the river. And there's just a few shots of kind of the precarious positioning there. So Kent mentioned the state legislature. We kind of affectionately call it the OCCIF fund. It's the Oregon Courthouse Capital Construction and Improvement Fund. So as far as justifying the replacement needs of county courthouses, to a large extent, that's already been done. The state legislature already deemed a number of the county courthouses throughout the 36 counties in Oregon to be substandard, inadequate, in dire need of either improvements or replacements. So they created this fund. So they will issue state bonds to cover up to half of the cost of construction or improvements on a county courthouse. But you have to get in a queue because they can't certainly do that all at one time for all the needs. So when this became aware of this, that early work that started back in 15 was really the work necessary to get to the state legislature, get in the queue and get prioritized. So there's been a couple done already. Deschutes County had some work done. Multnomah County is under construction today. Lane County and Clackamas are already prioritized, and we're at the top of the next queue. So we're in the projected biennium budgets for 21-23, or 2019 to 21 and 21 to 23. But we still have to come up with the full financing strategies, get the good cost estimates in, but at least we put in the work. And when I say opportunity meets this preparation with opportunities, the fact that we've been doing a lot of work identifying the deficiencies of the existing, and we've got the Red Soils Campus Master Plan that has always planned to accommodate a new courthouse in some day when we knew we could get the funding. So that gave us a real leg up. Lane County is still searching, still working on securing a site and getting in some other design elements that they need to get in. So we're a bit ahead of the curve on that one, and we want to keep that momentum going. So I mentioned the master plan. You can see there that the existing buildings that exist today are the Development Services Building and the it's mislabeled there. It says Development Services Building twice. That should say Public Services Building on the bottom, Development Services on top. So those of you familiar with the campus, the bottom building is the one that houses the Commissioner's Office and Public and Governmental Affairs and Legal and Finance and a lot of the internal services and H3S, Health, Housing, and Human Services. The building across the courtyard is home to Department of Transportation Development, Water Environmental Services, whose director is sitting here with us today, and his new deputy director, as well as Business and Community Services and another of other ancillary tourism and cultural affairs are housed in that facility. And then we've got that courtyard, and then the new county courthouse has always been planned in that triangulation, and the main entrance to that courthouse with that eastern orientation squares right onto Mount Hood. So it creates a nice little triangular with a visual straight onto Mount Hood. Looking to the east. So a lot of work's been done to prepare this campus. This campus is currently served by a central utility plant, the CUP that we call it. It's got buried underground utilidor that's already got the power, the dark fiber, copper, closed loop hot and cold systems, chillers and boilers for air conditioning and heat. So a lot of that is in place today. It has been stubbed out, so it just gets extended. We way overbuilt the capacity of our existing system today, so it's not going to be an issue at all to bring this new facility online. And we'll get immediate, in fact, we'll get cost savings because we'll be using more of the capacity that's already been built. Traffic circulation improvements will be designed to accommodate the courthouse, so there's going to be a loop road that's going to help with the circulation patterns. But there will be some impacts, because we've got some, that's what makes the project a bit complex, is we do have to do some additional site improvements to get this ready for the courthouse. So apologize for the fine print, but this gives you kind of a quick look. So some of the work, this is a chicken and egg thing. So to get into the queue and to get before, this goes in through the Oregon Justice Department as part of that OCCIF. The Oregon Justice Department and the Supreme Court Justice prioritizes which projects they're going to support. But to do that, you have to give them some information, some cost information, before you've actually got funding to do all the work that's going to give you the cost estimations and things. So that planning grant that Kent mentioned before, the $1.2 million, we've got Sarah architects on board. They've done a lot of the Red Soils campus work in the past, helped with the PSB and the DSB building and the Red Soils master plan. So they were contracted to basically help kind of size this new facility. And again, this is going to get refined significantly as we actually go out to bid and start the actual design and development process. But this is what gave us, Kent mentioned 154, that number's up to 189 now. We just got estimates and we had a 16% increase in just construction inflation costs since that 154 was estimated. So the new building, 215,000 square feet, departmental gross square footage is what's referenced there. So, and then it's got how it's kind of staggered out right now and laid out on the schematic of the 5 stories plus the basement level, with the upper stories 2 through 5 being basically courthouse facilities and judicial quarters, with some support for the district attorney's office, which is not part of the courthouse, so we'll fund that independently without a match. And then DHS, that's the State Department of Human Services. And so you get a big benefit. You get the 50% match instead of a much lower match if you also co-locate a state facility. So having the Department of Human Services in that space there provides us tremendous leverage of match funding on the project. So again, that's kind of the schematic that was laid out to help us kind of determine the cost estimates of the courthouse. So it's up to 189. The state will fund 94.5. We'll be responsible for the other 94.5 million, plus all of the other work that's necessary to prepare the site. So this is the schematic I've talked about. Here we are today. So right now today at March of 18, we're kind of right in the middle of that biennium cycle there of 17 to 19, which is what we're calling that pre-planning phase. Total courthouse design and construction cost, that reset estimate we just got a couple weeks ago, we had to turn in the revised numbers on March 7th to the Oregon Justice Department. And that's the 189 split between the county and the 1.2. We also have to put in a 1.2 match, so we actually have 2.4 going to all this pre-planning effort. That's in addition to the 189 that's just for the construction. The source of match funding is still being worked out to be determined, but it'll be some combination of current general fund reserves that we may have now, as well as some level of debt funding, whether it's full faith and credit, revenue bonds, general obligation bonds. Don't have that determined yet. That's part of the financing strategy and the discussions that'll take place with the Board of County Commissioners. And then the state money is on a reimbursable basis. So it's great, but you got to come up with funds before you get the money back. And it all has to go through one account. Even our funds, we have to remit to the state, get them custodian into that OCCIF fund, basically to wash it through there for the accounting purposes. What that says is we may need to call upon a bank line of credit for cash flow so we can pay our bills during the planning and construction cycle and then repay that line of credit through the reimbursements of the state. So there's a complex piece of financing that's going to go in to this. And I think we've actually got about 8 different sub-projects that need financing strategies related to it. So what's happening during this first phase? Because I've showed on the previous slide, we've broken it down into two phases to 2023 ribbon cutting. In this phase right now, we had to assess the current courthouse and provide kind of evidentiary information that shows that, yes, indeed, it is a candidate for replacement for a number of issues. Sarah led that effort, Sarah Architects as well. Then, as I mentioned, we had to determine the future courthouse needs. So they've been doing a lot of conversations with all the courthouse staff and ancillary services to do a needs analysis so they could get some kind of a schematic floor plan, square footage layout to get a proxy on that cost. And then we had to move to get secured priority ranking. So accomplished so far in this phase of the project. We also need to update the Red Soils Master Plan. I saw Laura Turway sitting back here that is going to be a critical partner for the City of Oregon City because these facilities exist within the City of Oregon City. So everything we do, we're going to do in a coordinated fashion with the city's planning department led by Laura and the city staff and get their guidance and direction and approvals for permitting and moving forward. So we've already got a Red Soils campus plan that's been adopted by the City of Oregon City and just need to make a couple of minor adjustments based on this new information. And so it's a priority that we get that back before the City of Oregon City in very short order. I don't have a specific timeline, but tomorrow would be good, but sometime in the very near future. And then I mentioned finalizing the plans. So right now, again, a lot of strategic discussions going on. We have the capacity to just fund this through future general fund revenue streams and a revenue bond, but then that would put stresses on our existing county operations. Think of a school district that needs a new high school, and they say, well, we'll just pay for it out of the property tax revenue that we get that pays for our classrooms and those kinds of things. And it puts a real strain. Most districts, fire districts, school districts, community colleges, others, usually go out for general obligation bonds for big capital projects and don't rely, and they use their operating funds then to run and manage those facilities. So those are the conversations that'll be going on, and we'll get direction from our board, and they'll get input from a lot of other parties that they want to hear from in making those decisions. But that's what we'll be doing over the course of the next few months, is really kind of finalizing. What we are confident is that we're not going to lose our place in the queue and that we can get the match funding so we don't lose this opportunity with the state. We just need to get a definitive plan exactly of what that financing strategy is going to look like. And then the Red Soils campus site preparation. So this is an interesting piece. We've got several county facilities in the more temporary facilities. It's not in the DSB or the PSB buildings that have been built recently. It's kind of those ancillary buildings that are spread throughout campus. We have 4 for H3S. We have 2 behavioral health centers. We've got a clinic and a dental facility. And we've got a women and children facility that all have to be relocated to a new facility to make way for everything associated with this Red Soils campus planning. We have to create some new parking strategies because we're going to take some of the parking spaces that I used to use and my colleagues today still use for the DSB facility. We have our technology services are in 2 buildings. Both of those need to be relocated. And we want to do those fairly early because that's our lifeline. They connect all of our systems. So we want to make sure that we're not scrambling to relocate them. And I think that's going to be one of the first ones I think we're going to solve. I think we've got a good strategy of relocation them to another part of in proximity to the campus. And then we have the OSU extension that operates out of 2 buildings, a main building and an annex. And we're building a new OSU extension building right across Beaver Creek Road on the corner of Warner Milne. That project's been in the works. It's going to be self-funded. It's not part of the funding strategy for the courthouse, but it is part of this courthouse project, because when we vacate those facilities, that will open up new space to be repurposed or relocated on that site when OSU moves across the road. So every one of these is a project plan. Relocating H3S, relocating extension, relocating technology services, building new parking. This interim parking, and we say interim, it doesn't mean it's going to be temporary. It's going to be temporary until a long-range parking solution is determined up with probably some kind of a parking structure as the campus continues to grow. But all of these things are interdependent, so that's what creates a little bit of, if we're going to hit that 2023 deadline, we've got to make sure that all of these other projects are moving in sync and that there's no one sub-project that's hanging up the big prize. So then we get through all of that prep work and planning work. That takes us into the 2019-2021 biennium. This is when we'll ask for the first big chunk. And right now we've kind of broken our ask into 1/3, 2/3. 1/3 for all the design, development, architects, engineering, construction, and then the bulk of the funds for construction. So we're in conversations right now. We'll get it all at once if that's better. If the Justice Department would rather we made one request and they issued the bonds and we had that funds to draw on, or if they would rather we broke it to get it through the legislature and get it. We'll work however they want, but they know what our total number is. So now the strategy is lump sum or in parts. But we want to make sure we get at least enough in the 19 to 21 to cover the costs we're going to incur during that period. So this is where, at that point, we'll hopefully complete all the red soils prep work. Then we'll actually get in, this is where we get into the external contracting out for architectural and engineering services. I mentioned Sarah's on contract today, but they're only on contract to get us through that phase one. There'll likely be a bidder on this next big chunk of the project, but we'll be going out for an RFP, and there's already a number of large construction firms who have already called and asked to be put on a list or to be notified when that proposal is coming out. So we won't be lacking. I hope. I mean, a number of them are stretched too with their resources. You know, construction firms. I mentioned the cost escalation, but just the resources alone are getting strapped. There's a lot of projects going on, but at least the multifamily things are starting to slow down here in the state, and that should free up things a bit. But we still have two, schools are getting built, and that's chewing up a lot of the resources as well. So that contract for architectural and engineering, the A&E services, and that'll be a one-year design process is how it's kind of planned out. We'll get the RFP out, we'll get somebody selected, and then that next year under their leadership, we will get our final courthouse designs done. So that schematic 5-story I showed you before, that's when that gets refined. The image, the visual that you have on your table in the fact sheet, that's when that gets refined. And then once that work is completed, then we'll put a contract out for construction management and general contractor services. And then that will be based on the design work that's completed. And then we'll go through all of our pre-construction requirements, permits, revised cost estimates. And this is where we'll be really actively engaging with Oregon City. We got to get the Red Soils Master Plan, concept plan approved. And then the next big piece, we're getting the design work approved before we can go into construction. And then the final phase is the exciting part. That's when we actually start building this new courthouse. So that's currently kind of targeted for a 2-year construction phase. I think it took 14 months to build the courthouse back in 1934, the one that we have now today. That was a courtroom, courthouse. This will be 14. And determine the future of the existing courthouse today. So a lot of interest. What's the county going to do with the existing courthouse? Well, one is we're not going to vacate it until this new one's built. So we've got a little time until 2023 to kind of talk about it. But we've already kind of started those discussions. We've met with this group. We've met with the Downtown Oregon City Association. We'll be working with Oregon City staff because, it's in their jurisdiction. Eric Underwood's their economic development coordinator. He'll get involved in this at some point in time, and then he'll tap into the county's resources as he needs assistance in that front. But basically, it's going to be surplus property for the county. We're moving to a new courthouse, and the plan today is we're not going to have a need of use in that facility. But rather than just put it out for bid on as surplus property, the county has a strong interest in engaging the community, the business community, the community at large, and the city of Oregon City, to say, how can we be more prescribed in what that building becomes in the future going forward? What would be the most opportunistic to provide value to the city and to Oregon City? So we can start those conversations. We've already started them, basically, but I think just what I'm trying to assure is we've got plenty of time. We had somebody in here a little bit ago, Sam from tourism, who couldn't stay for this. He goes, but I really want to know what's going to happen to the old building. I said, well, we'll be there until 2023. So he goes, oh, good. Then I don't have to worry about missing this lunch today to make sure I get my input in. But it's really, I think what this speaks to is the exciting opportunity that these two projects, the one up on Red Soils, is going to have a dramatic impact on that area. We're going to engage with the community there as well, just to make sure that we are understanding those impacts. There's going to be positive, and there could be some perceived negatives for the surrounding neighborhoods, the residential area, the traffic flows, and those kinds of things, anytime you bring more density into an area. So the community engagement process, audiences are going to be, and this is going to be ongoing. This is happening now, and it's going to continue throughout. And the direct impact that I've kind of listed here are those current courthouse occupants and users. We don't want to lose sight of the people who go to work every day in that building. And we're basically building them a new house, So we want to make sure that the judges and the sheriff's staff and the support staff that operate out of that building and the district attorney's office and everybody else, that their needs are being expressed and met and being heard. There's the taxpayers, because even if we just use our discretionary general fund, it's still, that would be funding that then would be not going to another resource. So clearly the taxpayers at large, we want to communicate this need and this opportunity and gain their support. And then the occupants and the clients of the relocated county operations. I mentioned some of those sensitive technology services, internal services, that's mostly an internal communication with staff. But H3S, those, they get a lot of clients and a lot of vulnerable clients using their facilities today. And with the behavioral health and some of these other things, we want to make sure we're way communicating ahead of the curve if there's going to be a new location for them to go to from the one they're accustomed to. So a lot of sensitivity around our audiences and the type of communication that's necessary. The indirect impact, as I mentioned, all the folks who live in that vicinity of the Red Soils campus, the Oregon City business community that we're addressing here today, the community at large. And that's both for the big project, the new project up on the campus, as well as the repurposing of the courthouse down here in Oregon City. So the methods we're going to use are pretty standard, what you might expect. We have a dedicated website. You can go to clackamas.us/CRP for Courthouse Replacement Project. And that's where you'll find some information like this fact sheet today, and that'll be a site where we'll keep updated information so you can go on demand and kind of get the most current information that's available. County video and cable access, and I think there's a meeting tomorrow. I heard from our videographer back here. There's a meeting tomorrow with the county staff to start working on that project. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out, hashtag CLACCO Quarterly, and we'll have information on there. We got the fact sheets that I handed out today. We're going to have a speakers bureau where myself and others can take this presentation, kind of get skilled up on it, and then we can kind of go viral a bit and have a lot of folks out that are kind of trained through that speakers bureau that can go out and address a number of community events. Open houses, charrettes. I think there's a real desire to have some open houses in the existing courthouse to kind of show the need, to kind of heighten the awareness of what we're doing, and more. You'll catch all and more. So how can this group help? How can any group help that's related to this project is, stay aware, stay engaged, and stay supportive, and stay tuned. Lots of exciting things going on. This is from that same county website. Tim Hyder is our public affairs manager, so I just figured I'll put Tim on the hook. He's on the hook on the current website, so I'll make him on the hook here today too. So any questions, comments, feed them into Tim. That'll be a central kind of repository, and that'll get to the project team members and have a single point of contact for that kind of public communication. So with that, I think we're maybe a little ahead of schedule, but open up to questions.
I came with my questions already set up.
Okay.
You kind of talked about the parking situation, which obviously, and you mentioned structure, which made me feel better. But the traffic on Beaver Creek is going to be badly infected. It's difficult now. One of the problems now is the bus stops right there on the road, and people back up behind them. So is solving these problems, widening Beaver Creek, whatever it is, are these things in your planning?
They are, absolutely.
And the bus problem, too.
And we'll be working with the City of Oregon City, who has to approve all of that traffic impact work that we do and make sure that what's done in construction does mitigate those impacts that you're discussing.
Well, I'll be asking this question again as things go on, so you don't forget.
I know staff
Don't worry, I'll get
at DSB has experience of trying to get out of that parking lot during a winter storm event. It took a long time.
Hi, Gary. With the movement of the courthouse to the hilltop, there's seemingly a lot of lack of private services, coffee shops, places to go. And I didn't see an overall master plan in the presentation today about what other things might happen around that courthouse, because you don't have a lot of places. Could you address that? I know there's eateries in the current Danielson Mall, but what else might there be coming?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I can address that from the fact of what the county owns, and if I had a little bigger schematic, and I'll actually see if we bring that when we get the updated concept plan. Across Beaver Creek Road from that site that I showed here is actually where the extension service is going on the Warner Milne end. The county actually owns property that runs all the way to the curve of Beaver Creek. So that area is kind of designated for future retail and support services kinds of private sector. As well as you've got Mr. Emmert's property just due east where he's got a lot of different operations going in the building, and then there's still space in the shopping center. I know a lot of surface parking in there that looks like it could accommodate some more retail use. Kind of on that south side is kind of our commercial industrial, Benchmade knives and those folks, and then on the north side is really kind of that retail area. So I think you're going to see, I think one of the catalytic events here with having this many new people coming up and working in that proximity is going to create a lot of demand for those kinds of services, restaurants, and chains and things that don't exist today in Oregon City. And the benefit there is that creates the demand during the day for those to make the business case, and then those amenities are available in the evenings and weekends for the residents too, because that's where you get the synergy for daytime business demand, and then weekend and evening local demand. So I think we'll see that, but I think Eric Underwood too has got a whole Beaver Creek kind of economic development strategy that will tie into this too. So I would encourage the folks that in economic development with the City of Oregon City and Eric working with Laura and her team at the county on those economic strategies.
Hi, Gary. Real curious about the existing courthouse and how complex that building really is. Is it something with the internal walls that can be easily changed, or is that building so complex that it's not really going to be, it's going to have to comply with what walls are there now? And then I'm also curious about, you got a lot of employees there. I don't really know where they all go to park, but is there other properties associated with that are going to be also kind of up for redevelopment or, at least use for parking for whatever might take over?
Yeah, those are great questions. One is, to my knowledge, we haven't done that internal analysis yet to see how that current facility could be repurposed, what's weight bearing, what's non-weight bearing. I would surmise that since it was built in a certain form in 1934 to have one courthouse and some just office space and things, that the fact that it's been retrofit and kind of jerry-rigged and everything else over the last 50, 60 years, I would imagine a lot of that is non-weight bearing structures that have kind of been put in place. And so I almost think if you pulled it back to its original bones, you'd probably have quite a bit of flexibility. But I do think seismic's going to be a major issue, and the HVAC systems and the electric. I know we've kept up with the wiring and the electrical. We've put a lot of resources into that facility to keep it functioning as well as it does today. But we recently added on to that, and even then you can tell as soon as you enter into that newer space, you can tell the difference in air quality and ventilation and flow. So there's old systems, there's new systems kind of patched together. So it's going to be fairly extensive, I think. And again, right now, no funds have been identified by the county to do that kind of analysis. I think that would be the kind of due diligence that we'd be looking for interested partners to perhaps participate in. But I don't want to get ahead of myself, and the commissioners they may determine at some point they want to put a little bit into that to get some answers. As far as the other facilities, that's a good point, and I didn't include it here because we're still kind of doing that assessment, but the Holman building, so that's a separate building just for the juries. The juries will locate up into this facility and be in the building as they should be. So the Holman building will be an opportunity for redevelopment. Some of this is leased space, so it just turns back over to the landlord for repurposing. The Masonic Lodge, we have some district attorney office operating out of the Masonic Lodge. We've got some other, so I've asked for a list as kind of the project manager to say, show me all the buildings that we occupy today by square footage, by lease terms and everything else, so I can kind of get a sense, so I can communicate out to groups like this what the impacts might be.
Hi, Gary. A couple of questions about moving current county departments from where they're presently located. I didn't hear you mention the juvenile department. Will they be expected to move as well?
Right now, juvenile is still in our current concept plan. They're still planned to be where they are today. So they're not going to be affected by this phase. And the current jail is also not affected, although there is plans for a new jail someday on that Red Soils campus. But neither the jail or the juvenile is in this phase of the project. We can do this project without impacting the jail or juvenile.
And then what about behavioral health clinic?
Behavioral health, those are the two of the four H3S buildings that will be impacted.
And can you tell us now what the time frame will be for moving out of their present location?
Sometime in the next year and a half to 2 years. It's pretty quick track that so right now we're doing, Sarah's working with Rich Swift, our director of H3S, and his team on the needs analysis. They've had meetings last week and this week with the staff in the Stewart Behavioral and WIC and the clinic to identify the current uses and the future needs. And then we're also doing some work with the broker to identify potential sites for relocating. And the current desire is to kind of co-locate them all in one facility. So we'll take 4 separate buildings and perhaps bring them into one facility. We also Rich's staff did an analysis of where current patrons are coming from a geographic analysis. So we can see that whatever site's chosen is still a very good site for the clients that use that facility. And right now, the McLaughlin corridor in its entirety, because of transit services, because of the transit and where the patrons are coming from, we're looking at a number of sites on the corridor and in the downtown area. But that is to be determined, but that's a quick track.
I had, it could be a coincidence, but it looked like the time frames were in bienniums. And how secure is the state portion of the funding, and how is it appropriated? So is it already obligated for this project?
It is. It's secure. The bonds haven't been issued, but the bonds have been authorized. And so they've already authorized them for the work that's already been done at Deschutes. They already authorized them for the work that's being done at Multnomah County, and they will authorize another issuance for our project. The way it is, it's a reimbursable basis though. So it's kind of like I said, that's why we put it in the biennium, because we can get reimbursed for costs that we've incurred for design and development in the 19 to 21 biennium, and then we'll get reimbursed for construction costs through legislative action in the 21-23 biennium. But the funding reimbursement comes at the end of that biennium. Okay. And the process is Oregon Justice Department prioritizes, they make their recommendations to the legislature approves, authorizes the issuance of the reimbursement at the end of that biennium.
Okay, and then I want to strike fear in a project manager's heart by suggesting some thoughts about scope creep. And one of the things there's almost a bit of irony in some ways. The reason for the move is related to seismic threats. Has there been consideration of it adding or approaching FEMA and having emergency services coordination be part of the development of this courthouse?
Of the new courthouse?
Yes,
or
the new one.
Not that I'm aware of. I am not aware that there's been any. I know that it'll be built to today's standards, so I know the design and development effort will all be, it'll be seismic, it'll be solid, it'll meet all those current needs. But whether there's any external resources that we could tap into for additional funding, good point. Probably something we should look at in the consideration of the financing plan. But to my knowledge, nobody's explored that.
Hello, Gary. New here to Clackamas County and with the economic development team. And last week was the Mass Timber Conference in Portland, Oregon. And over the last 3 years, the Mass Timber Conference has grown exponentially, almost 50% every year here. And what's really interesting is in the economic development, we have in Clackamas County also initiative for mass timber, cross-laminated timber here. And for the first time, you're really starting to see technology like Google and Apple and people really embracing the use of cross-laminated timber here in mass timber projects here. My question is, the county exploring looking to this being a mass timber project here?
Absolutely. The extension building is already incorporating, and that's already in the initial design. That's a different architect. Soderstrom is working on that. Mass timber, based on their mission, OSU Extension and Forestry, that's being incorporated fairly significantly. And as you know, it's on the board's strategic plan in our federal, it's old habits, and the county's federal legislative agenda to promote cross-laminated timber, not just for the quality of the product and its environmental, but also because most of Clackamas County is in timberland, and we're highly dependent on a timber economy. So we're really hopeful that the embracing CLT in projects that the public controls, so that we can pave the way for the use of CLT by the private sector and help create that demand that will then help us on the supply side of getting more timber off of the county property. But that's an excellent point, because I know Commissioner Humberson has been kind of the designated, and Commissioner Schrader to a degree, the champions of our CLT efforts, working with your BCS group. And CLT was incorporated in here, and it was interesting you mentioned that, because it came up in one of our project meetings, and the kind of discussion was, well, we may have to drop it because of the expense and thing. And I said, wait, I actually have a little bit of insight into this is bigger than a pure cost factor. Even though I think the cost factors are going to become much less significant as this product gets embraced. But it's clearly, I think the board has clearly expressed an interest in being a leader in the use of CLT in new construction projects. And I recall a couple years ago, Greg Chamoff, chair of the Clackamas Community College, said if that product was more abundant today, that board would have mandated that CLT be used in all of its new buildings that they've just constructed with their bond measure. And Mayor Gamba reached out recently and said, is there any way we can get North Clackamas School District to build the new Milwaukee High School out of cross-laminated timber? Because to set that, and there's a willingness, I think, but you have to get into the construction cycle and you have to make it a priority. It's a little tougher for school districts to defend, whereas the county will gain tremendous economic benefit if CLT becomes a more prevalent building source.
As a follow-up to that, Gary, the studies I've read is that cross-laminated timber also has tremendous positive benefits in seismic events, that there's quite a bit more flexibility with that type of a building product as compared to just brick and mortar or other types of steel, that they actually give a little bit more.
At last year's Mass Timber Conference that I attended, one of the architects was telling a little story. He had a client in Asia and got a call in the middle of the night. They were experiencing an earthquake, and this person was kind of saying, you promised us this was, going to be better in a seismic event. And he goes, well, just, wait until the event's over and then let me know if you see any issues, any challenge. And it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It flexed and moved, and there was no permanent damage to the building at all. So it handled that event. And also fire is one too. A lot of people think wood and fire has, but actually you'll see examples where it's almost like a tree that burns in the forest. The outer will burn, but the tree will stand, and it doesn't burn in through the core. And that's a lot of what a CLT piece is too. It'll char, but there's examples where steel girders have melted where the CLT is still intact.
I saw some hands over here. Daphne?
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Kathy.
Well, I'm going back to the impacts on downtown and Main Street. So I didn't quite understand. John Lewis asked about the Holman building. Does the county own that building?
That's an excellent question. I wish I could answer for you right off the top of my head. I don't know if we own it or lease it.
Yeah, I just assumed they owned it, but I'm hearing today that you might not.
We own most of our buildings, and we have a desire to, get out of lease space where we can and get into own. But that one, I do not know.
Then the other one is I'm not familiar with what exact services are in the building that's between 10th and 11th on Main.
Is that
So Cheryl was talking about all the services going next to your parking lot.
Yeah.
And is everything vacating out of there? And who owns that building? I thought the county owned that too.
I don't know, and I don't know.
Oh, boy.
No. But I am waiting for the list, because I asked for exactly that list of what buildings we occupy, who's in them, how many FTE, and do we own or lease, and if we lease, what are the terms of the lease, So I'm kind of waiting for that
because I was...
But I think it's all related. I think that's a sheriff's function down there, a community corrections kind of facility
Maybe,
that you're talking about.
Yeah. Or I thought it was parole and probation, but maybe not.
It might be really, yep.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Karina, you answered that very quickly.
Thanks, Daphne. Thanks for the presentation today. Gary, you showed that we're using the construction manager general contracting rule, which allows us to do a lot of value engineering and such. I believe it also allows us to put preferences in those bid packages for any aspect of the big generals that are going to bid on a project this size. Bringing local subcontractors in as part of that process. Are you looking at that so that some of our smaller subs might be able to get involved in a big project like this?
We haven't yet, because we're not there in the process, but I would think that would certainly be a consideration that will be discussed as those bid packets are getting prepared. I think, and there's still conversation, is it going to be a design build? Is it going to be your architectural services and then general contractor? Is it going to be a P3, a public-private partnership approach? So all that's still kind of being worked out during this kind of planning year.
Gary, William Gifford here. I apologize for my circumlocucious questioning here, but
I've known you for a long time.
Yeah, that's how I work. Later this year, the OCBA is going to be having a pair of forums on the subject of growth. Part 1 and Part 2, one on residential, the other on commercial growth. And aside from the seismic issues of the current courthouse, we understand that there is a significant impact based on growth requiring the movement of those courthouse facilities. Part 1 of the question is I imagine there's 2 aspects to that growth. One is growth in the county's population, and secondly is the growth of people that are requiring the services of the courthouse, offenders and so on. And so I don't know, is crime rate going up that requires, they're not all crimes, but that's requiring those services, or is it just based on population? The reason that I'm asking the question is because it sounds as though later you're going to be needing to refine your story a little bit to explain more to the public about why we need to move those facilities. And is that because we are also going to be needing to go out for a vote for those bonds? Is that going to be a voted bonding mechanism that we're going to have to do? And in case, that would be nice to have that story a little more fleshed out.
Yeah, and when you say defending the move or justifying the move, are you referring to the current courthouse, or you're referring to those facilities up on red soils that are going to have to be the current courthouse? Yeah, and I think that's pretty self-evident when you see how the space has been constricted and the safety. That fact sheet, I think, really highlights the top 2 or 3 issues around safety and security and basically pace of justice. We have a longer queue because we can't process because we just don't have the current capacity. Your other question, though, about is it a growth in crime and the criminal activity, or is it just population growth as a metric? And this is a really challenging part about when you're trying to size a facility like this to meet current day needs as well as meet needs 50, 75, 100 years into the future. This building is going to be built to be a long-term solution and not be a 7-year, burned down by fire, or even a 50-year that becomes a fire trap. So what is the criminal justice system going to be, 25 years from now? Is it still going to operate the way it operates today? So I know there's a lot of talk about video arraignments and other kinds of tools. I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where somebody just gets prosecuted from their home. So I think we still may have a need for a courthouse facility. But your points are well taken. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that the architects are going to be dealing with on space planning. And there are a lot of agencies throughout the country that have been designing kind of state-of-the-art courthouses that'll be tapped into for best practices. And third question, vote. Only if it's a general obligation bond. If it's a revenue bond, it can be self-funded through existing general fund. There's no vote necessary.
So I have a question for you, Gary. Being the Oregon City Business Alliance that's putting on this event, we're always focused on what the ripple effect of new economic development is in our local region. Has anyone done an analysis of what a $189 million new investment up on the Red Soils campus will be for Oregon City and Clackamas County in the way of construction jobs, possibly new permanent jobs because of the bigger facility? It'd be interesting to see if that's been looked at as to what the residual of those dollars being recirculated over and over and over again with the local businesses.
To the best of my knowledge, that kind of economic impact analysis has not been done. I don't believe we've done it. But I think that's a piece when it comes to this communication strategy and communicating to the public about the support for this project. Those are really critical pieces. Is for every dollar of public dollars invested, what does it stimulate or catalyze in the form of private sector investment? There'll be some, and that could be an interesting project for an Eco Northwest, but we'd have to pay for, county would have to pay for it. Or maybe with NERC, the Portland State University's Northwest Economic Research Center. They did an economic impact analysis for us a few years ago about the impact of existing in Oregon City today with the courthouse and what impact that has on. So we've already got that body of work, and I actually asked for an old copy of that from the Deputy County Administrator, because it could maybe be an extension of that study that was already done with NERC.
I'm really excited. It's a fast track to get it all done and have the ribbon cutting in 2023. Being in land development where I've seen things take forever, I'm not used to those type of schedules. So I compliment you with the positive ambition.
John Foote, our district attorney, is not here to defend himself today, but in one of our meetings he said, quicker, we got to have it quicker. Can you speed up this timeline? That was I think my first meeting as project manager is, can I accelerate this and get it done? But I appreciate, this has been a long time coming as an active user. He's very interested. And the main thing is he doesn't want to lose this opportunity with the state.
Oh, definitely. That is what makes it all capable of becoming a reality. So, okay, well, thank you, Gary. We appreciate all the information. We look forward to hearing from you again.